Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a house most people would envy: cherry wood floors, sun-drenched breakfast nook, and a perfect gardenia hedge trimmed like it's trying to win an award. But don't get too cozy just yet, because behind that manicured lawn and tasteful art collection lies a story so gut-wrenching, you probably won't survive this with your illusions about perfect families intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is where you are. In the comments, I love seeing where we're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a breeze, a cool January morning in the sleepy suburb of Pine Brook Hills, Oregon. You park along Sycamore Lane, just like you do every Sunday. Same time, same spot under the jacaranda tree that still hasn't shed its stubborn leaves. You reach beneath the porch frog, the ceramic one with the faded eyes, and retrieve the familiar spare key. You've done this for 6 years now. Walk in, vacuum the rugs, dust the banisters, maybe steal a fond glance at the family photos: Eleanor in her emerald scarf, Gregory at the 4th of July barbecue, Natalie at prom with that smile too big for the frame. And sometimes Caleb, too, though he's been absent from the walls lately. Funny how photos disappear when people start disappointing the family narrative. But this time, something's off. The moment you open the door, it hits you. A smell, metallic, thick, like rust and raw meat. You pause, holding your breath. You whisper hello, but the house doesn't answer. You shuffle toward the kitchen, your feet almost unwilling. Maybe something's burned. Maybe it's a broken pipe. Maybe, but then you see it. Eleanor Whitmore is slumped forward on the island counter, hair matted with blood. One hand still clutching a spatula like she meant to flip something. A few feet away lies Natalie, twisted onto her side, eyes half open, still holding her phone, her thumb frozen mid-text. You don't scream, not at first. You stagger backward, slip against the tile. Your hands shake too hard to grab your phone. You fumble with it anyway. You dial. The dispatcher's voice is calm. Yours is not. By the time the police arrive, your breath has become a rattling whisper. You watch them cordon off the scene, photograph everything, whisper in low tones as though they're afraid to wake the dead. They find Gregory in the dining room, shot once in the chest. He's slumped over his leather briefcase, the handle still in his hand, like he just walked in from a meeting and never made it to his chair. The scene is too clean for chaos. No shattered windows, no forced doors, a home frozen in routine. The breakfast table still has a bowl of bananas and a bottle of multivitamins. The TV in the living room still murmurs the weather. But there's one detail that makes everyone pause. The security system is down, not just off, ripped out. The DVR that would have recorded the footage, gone, clean. As if someone had reached into time and deleted the evidence frame by frame. One of the officers leans in, whispering to another, "This wasn't random." You feel it too. This wasn't rage. This was rehearsal. Later, at the precinct, you overhear murmurs Caleb's name. They ask if you've seen him lately. You shake your head. Not for months. Maybe more. Not since the shouting match on the lawn, Gregory's voice raised for the first time you'd ever heard. Something about cutting him off and final straw. Historians still argue whether ancient Rome fell from within or was brought down by invading tribes. Honestly, looking at this family, you'd say it's both. The enemy outside doesn't always do the worst damage. As the sun sets over Sycamore Lane and the media begins circling like crows, you find yourself staring at the porch frog, the key still in its belly, that small, absurd symbol of trust and routine. And you wonder, how long had this ending been crouching beneath it, waiting? You step through the Whitmore house again, but slower this time. Not as a cleaner, as a silent observer, retracing steps, catching fragments of a story that's already gone off the rails. The staleness in the air hasn't lifted. Blood has dried. The rooms sealed off with yellow tape. But the house itself still speaks if you know how to listen. You start in the foyer, where framed magazine covers line the walls like trophies. Gregory Whitmore, media mogul of the Pacific Northwest. You catch headlines like "The Empire Behind the Smile and Power." Couple of Pine Brook, every photo polished, every expression curated. But beneath the glassy eyes, you begin to notice small things. A scuff mark on the baseboard, a hairline crack in the mirror, The kind of blemishes that only show up when the lights are too bright for too long. Down the hall, there's a powder room with a sticky note on the mirror. Smile. Natalie's watching. The marker's faded. You wonder if Eleanor left it for herself. A reminder that perfection was part of the job. The Whitmore home on Sycamore Lane had always been a kind of local landmark. 4th of July cookouts, Christmas light shows so elaborate the HOA had to ask them to tone it down. Everyone wanted an invite to their New Year's Eve parties, not because of the food though. Those truffle sliders were legendary. But because being inside that house felt like borrowing a little piece of their fairy tale. But fairy tales never mention the drafts that sneak in under the door. There was Gregory the Patriarch, a commanding presence in every room. Built his media firm from a garage startup to a regional empire. Still insisted on driving himself to work. Still read the morning paper in print. One of those I make the coffee, not drink it kind of guys. He once gave a commencement speech about resilience and knowing when to shut down your ego. Irony's got sharp teeth, doesn't it? Then there was Eleanor. Elegant in a quiet, intimidating way, she'd been a ballet dancer before marrying Gregory. Retired young. Devoted herself to philanthropy and Pilates. Her friends described her as unshakable, but staff whispered she was the type who smiled with her mouth, never her eyes. Marlene once caught her sitting alone in the greenhouse, sipping chamomile tea at 3 a.m. Now, some nights, she said, the silence is louder than the music. And Natalie, the golden child, 18, honors student, track star, the kind of kid who says thank you to the mailman. The sort who tutors classmates and brings her own snacks to share. Her room upstairs still smells faintly of lavender. There's a dream board above her desk with cutouts of Columbia University, an internship in Paris, and a gold sticky note that reads, "Get out, grow up, do good." It's written in bold Sharpie, with a heart. But not every room in this house was filled with dreams. Caleb's room is different. You can feel it before you step inside. It's darker, not because the blinds are drawn, but because something emotional has sunken into the walls. His posters are still up, bands you pretend to recognize, but all sharp fonts and angry colors. There's a guitar in the corner with only 3 strings left, a journal with torn-out pages, a half-packed duffel bag under the bed that smells like weed and cheap cologne. He hadn't lived here full-time in over a year, dropped out of college, floated from couch to couch, spent his time Instagramming expensive drinks, and posting motivational quotes he didn't write. Still, his name stayed in the family's mouths, always followed by a sigh. You flip through the mail on the entry table. One envelope stands out, unopened. Addressed to Caleb, a credit card statement, postmarked a week before the murders. You don't open it. You already know what's inside. Guilt in transaction form. Quirky fact for you, the ancient Egyptians believed that writing a person's name after death could either bless their spirit or trap it forever. You glance at the family portrait in the hallway. Caleb's figure is turned slightly inward, as if even the lens couldn't decide which way he belonged. Historians still argue whether domestic pressure or social isolation contributes more to psychological breakdowns in young adults. But this isn't a study, it's a bloodstain. A family who mistook structure for safety, discipline for love. And this house became both a shrine and a tomb. You wander back into the kitchen, retracing Marlene's steps. The coffee pot still has residue in the filter. 2 mugs, one half full. Sliced oranges on the counter, slightly brown at the edges. Someone had breakfast. Someone was interrupted. A fly buzzes near the fruit bowl. It lands, then lifts again. The silence hums louder than the fridge. Outside, neighbors walk their dogs like nothing happened. Because they don't know yet, but they will. And when they do, they'll shake their heads and say things like, "But they were such a nice family." And you'll know, that nice is just a polite placeholder for whatever we can't see. You first saw Caleb at Natalie's graduation party 2 summers ago. He stood apart from the crowd, beer in one hand, phone in the other, thumbs tapping something urgent. Probably not congratulations. His smile was perfect in photos, but never quite touched the eyes. Gregory introduced him proudly. Our eldest, sharp as a tack, but the hug was stiff, like someone trying to hold a cactus without flinching. Back then, Caleb still passed for troubled but charming, a little aimless, maybe just taking a gap year. or two. People whispered that he dropped out of Oregon State, but no one asked why. Not directly. That's the kind of question you avoid in polite society, like asking if the wine was re-gifted, or if the family lab was really at the farm now. But those closest to the Whitmores saw the cracks early. Teachers described him as brilliant but distracted. Friends said he was generous until he wasn't. His charm always had a timer on it. He could make you feel like the only person in the room, then disappear with your wallet. Caleb's downward spiral didn't start with a single dramatic moment. It was more like a series of missed steps down a marble staircase, a DUI swept under the rug, a credit card maxed out on accident, a brief stint in rehab, just a wellness retreat, the family insisted, all bandaged over with vacation photos and thin smiles at Sunday brunch. At 21, he still had that look some people mistake for promise. Tall, dark hair, expensive sneakers, but under it was something sour, like milk left out just one day too long. He spent most nights drifting from party to party, orbiting people who didn't ask too many questions. He had a talent for finding friends with open wallets and loose boundaries. When those dried up, he turned to his parents. Gregory and Eleanor kept saying no until they didn't. Then they said yes with conditions, then no. Again, it was a cycle. Really, one Caleb learned to spin. Guilt, pleading, grand promises about turning over new leaves, usually right before the next emergency. By late 2016, the family's patience was wearing thinner than the plastic on his maxed out Amex. Gregory finally cut him off completely. No more checks, no more bailouts. The trust fund was locked. The accountants were under strict orders. That December, Caleb showed up on the porch unannounced, shouting at his father in full view of the neighbors. Something about betrayal. Something about you owe me. Marlene heard it from the pantry. Said she'd never seen Gregory raise his voice before. Said Eleanor just stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed so tight they'd gone white. Historical fun fact. In ancient Greece, it was considered a public duty for fathers to disown sons who brought dishonor to the family name. That sounds harsh, until you realize how many modern parents quietly endure emotional blackmail just to keep peace at dinner. Back in the Whitmore kitchen, the tension only grew. Eleanor stopped talking about Caleb at book club. Gregory started skipping work functions. Natalie changed her passwords and stopped posting family photos. Still, they hoped. That was the thing. They kept hoping, like families do, that maybe the storm would pass, that maybe Caleb would call on his birthday, that maybe, just maybe, he'd come home for Christmas and be different. And Caleb did come home, but not for Christmas. That January, he texted Eleanor out of the blue, said he was ready to make things right, said he was sober now, said he missed them. He used the kind of words that look sincere when typed late at night. Eleanor showed the message to Gregory. He didn't respond immediately, just stared at it, lips pressed in thought. They talked for hours that night. Natalie joined in. There were voices raised, then lowered again. Eventually, reluctantly, they agreed to let him come by one weekend just to talk. Historians still argue whether forgiveness is a strength or a survival instinct for the Whitmores. It might have been both, or maybe it was something simpler: exhaustion. You remember the texts? You read them later. "We love you," Eleanor wrote, "but this has to be different." Caleb replied with a heart emoji. And so, the invitation was extended. One last olive branch. You wonder now what he packed for that visit. A few clothes, his old phone, a gun. They would have opened the door with smiles. Natalie probably hugged him. Eleanor likely brewed his favorite tea. Gregory might have even shaken his hand. And for a while, maybe for a few hours, there was a flicker of peace. But like everything in Caleb's life, that peace had an expiration date. You slip into the house again, but this time, not through the front door, through the cracks, through the air between glances, through the sound of forks tapping ceramic plates at dinner and the way no one quite says what they mean. That weekend in January was meant to be a fresh start. Eleanor lit candles in the hallway, as if scent could ward off memory. Natalie cleared the guest room herself, folding clean sheets with almost military precision. Gregory took a walk alone that morning, hands in his pockets, brow furrowed deep enough to leave shadows. And then Caleb arrived. He wore sunglasses indoors, one of those things he did when he wanted to look chill but came off like a Netflix villain. He hugged his mother first, hard and too long, told Natalie she looked grown. Gregory. He nodded at the play. That was all. Just a nod. The weekend was quiet on the surface. Caleb helped Eleanor with dinner, helped Gregory bring in the groceries, even asked Natalie about college apps. But you could feel it, the tension humming underneath like a power line stretched too tight. At one point, Marlene later recalled, she saw Eleanor reach out to touch Caleb's arm, and he flinched. That night, the family played cards in the living room. One of those maybe everything will be okay moments. Natalie laughed. Gregory cracked open a rare bottle of wine. Even Caleb smiled, but not with his eyes. Quirky tidbit for you. In 18th century Europe, it was common to hire professional mourners to weep at funerals, just in case the family wanted to appear more loved than they were. In some twisted way, that weekend felt like the reverse, everyone performing joy, hoping it would become real. But performance only holds so long. That Sunday morning, January 22nd, started like most others. Eleanor rose early, made breakfast. Natalie lingered upstairs, finishing a college essay. Gregory had a Zoom meeting scheduled for mid-morning. Caleb wandered in late, shirtless, yawning dramatically. They had eggs, toast, coffee. Gregory stepped into his office to take his call. Eleanor and Natalie remained in the kitchen. Caleb went upstairs, supposedly to shower, but something shifted. Historians still argue whether male entitlement in modern Western families is born of neglect, coddling, or cultural expectation. Whatever the source, in that house, in that moment, it turned lethal. Down the hall, in Gregory's nightstand drawer, was a small, legally registered handgun. Locked away, but the lock had been tampered with recently. A screwdriver left in the drawer. Dust disturbed. A premeditation disguised as disarray. Caleb returned to the kitchen quietly. Eleanor was at the stove, humming something faint, maybe Debussy, maybe just habit. Natalie sat at the counter, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone. You imagine the moment stretched thin, the gun raised, a breath held. 2 shots. Eleanor fell first. No scream, just the clatter of the spatula. Natalie turned confused, then frozen. She tried to run, didn't make it to the archway. Down the hall, Gregory ended his call and heard, what? Something drop. A shout? He stepped into the kitchen and saw his world collapse in real time. Before he could speak, before he could take a full breath, a third shot. The neighbors heard nothing. The house was insulated, silent. The world outside spun on, unaware, and inside, Caleb stood alone. You wonder what he felt then. Triumph, panic, nothing. Maybe he expected relief, but what he got was blood on his shoes and silence he couldn't charm his way out of. He moved fast, gloved hands. He'd thought ahead. He pulled the surveillance system's DVR, unplugged it cleanly. He wiped down surfaces, changed clothes, bagged what he could. But even careful killers forget something. Always. Sometimes it's big, like a fingerprint. Sometimes it's something smaller, like the ceramic frog that held the spare key, left slightly ajar. Dust scraped in a direction that didn't match Marlene's usual pattern. Before he left, he opened the refrigerator, grabbed a soda, drank half, left it in the sink. You stand there now, beside the ghost of that moment, hearing the fizz fade out. Caleb didn't run immediately. No, he sat for a moment in the living room, maybe checking himself in the mirror, maybe waiting to feel something. Then, he slipped out the back door. By the time Marlene arrived hours later, the house had returned to stillness, but not peace. You ever notice how houses remember things? The creak in the floorboard where Natalie always danced when she thought no one was watching. The spot on the windowsill where Eleanor used to place blooming orchids. Gregory's worn patch on the arm of the leather recliner. Now, those same places echo, but differently. You linger by the kitchen counter. The coffee's still in the pot. Cold now. Natalie's phone lies face down. You flip it. There's a half-written text still on the screen. Can't wait to tell you everything. That's where it ends. You wake up in the aftermath, still sitting in the same kitchen chair, still staring at the screen of Natalie's unfinished text. You almost expected to blink, to finish the sentence for you. But no, time doesn't cooperate like that. Neither do phones belonging to the dead. Outside, the sky shifts to overcast, Oregon gray, the kind of color that makes everything feel like it's suspended in a slow exhale. The authorities move fast. Yellow tape stretches across the lawn like a crime scene corset. tight, unnatural. Forensics sweep the home. Neighbors peek from curtains. Reporters arrive within hours. All soft shoes and sharp microphones. A tragedy this clean, this devastating. It travels fast. But in the early hours of the investigation, the leading theory is still intrusion, a burglary gone wrong, a random act, because that's what people want to believe. Random is easier than personal. Then detectives find no signs of forced entry, and that ceramic frog, still warm from use, begins to whisper a different truth. Inside, you watch investigators walk the house like archaeologists. They're not just looking for evidence, they're reconstructing intention. A wine glass left out. Gregory's briefcase, unopened but perfectly aligned. The DVR missing. The safe locked tight. You notice how the questions change. Who would want to harm them? Becomes, who knew the alarm code? And it doesn't take long before Caleb's name returns to the center of the conversation. He's not home. Hasn't been seen since the previous night. Gregory's phone logs show a missed call from Caleb around 2 a.m. The family SUV is missing, but Eleanor's compact is still in the driveway. By late afternoon, authorities issue a bolo "Be on the lookout." His photo hits the wire. Not a mugshot, but a graduation photo from 3 years ago. Clean cut, half smile, eyes that don't match the mouth. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. In medieval France, family members of accused murderers were sometimes required to publicly renounce them, like a reverse baptism. Imagine standing in a town square saying, "This one, he's no longer ours." Harsh, yes, but emotionally not unfamiliar. Back in the present, a sharp-eyed officer traces a credit card trail. Caleb didn't vanish. He left a digital breadcrumb buffet, hotel charges, gas station stops, and most damningly, an attempted online purchase from a spa suite in Las Vegas under his grandmother's name. They find him before midnight. He's poolside at a boutique hotel off the strip, wearing aviators and sipping from a bottle of champagne he didn't pay for. He's not alone. 3 friends, all grinning, all clueless. When officers approach, Caleb tries to act surprised. Overdoes it? Really? Hands to his head. What? Wait. What are you talking about? A performance so exaggerated it practically begs for a second take. Back in Oregon, the press runs with it. Media mogul family slain. Son detained in Vegas. You hear the anchors lower their voices at just the right moment for drama. They play graduation clips of Natalie, stock footage of Gregory shaking hands at a business expo. There's even a blurry photo of Eleanor, mid-laugh at a charity gala. But you're still in that kitchen, in your mind, at least. You remember the burn mark on the stovetop, the faint ring left by Gregory's coffee mug on the dining table, the faint whiff of lavender and cordite that somehow hasn't lifted. Caleb's arrest doesn't end the story. It deepens it. In interrogation, he puts on a show. At first, he's grieving, shocked, devastated. He asks if they're sure. He says he was trying to make things right. He even cries big, theatrical sobs with no tears. An officer watching from behind the glass mutters, "He's rehearsed this." And yet for a moment it almost works. His tone is right. His pauses are timed. He remembers to look confused at just the right things. But then the detective slides a photo across the table, a security still from a convenience store Caleb, hours after the murders, filling up the family SUV, same jacket, same shoes, different smile. The detective doesn't say much, just waits. Caleb's act falters. The sobs stop. His eyes dart, his fingers twitch. You see the moment that the gears grind too loudly in his head. The performance begins to crack. Historians still argue whether inherited guilt plays any role in high-profile parricide cases. Is it shame, rage, a twisted sense of justice, or just self-preservation in the most toxic form? Whatever it is, Caleb doesn't confess yet, but the walls are closing in, and the room where he used to sleep, the one with the guitar missing strings and the journal torn in half, has already said more than he ever will. And you're still there, a silent witness to a family that mistook proximity for closeness, love for loyalty, and entitlement for need. And now, everything is about to fall apart, frame by frame. You'd think the act of murder would echo longer in a person's mind, that it would stain every thought, every breath, like smoke clinging to your clothes after a fire. But when you see the surveillance footage from that gas station, the one where Caleb's filling up the SUV. You see no hesitation in his posture, no trace of grief in his eyes, just earbuds, a snack in one hand, calm as a man on his way to a music festival. The detectives back in Oregon know this too. They say he was chillingly collected, too clean for someone who just lost his entire family, the kind of calm that only comes when a plan is complete. They check the hotel footage next. The boutique place in Vegas with the infinity pool and purple backlighting. Caleb arriving, laughing, tossing his bag to a bellhop, ordering champagne like it's an errand, renting a spa suite under a card he knew his grandmother wouldn't notice right away. He invited friends, ordered food, played music. You wonder, was this the celebration? The reward he'd pictured when he planned the murders. One last night of luxury before the world caught up. There's something especially cold about partying in the wake of your family's murder. And yet, there's something disturbingly human about it too. The desperate reach for indulgence to numb what's coming. Ancient Romans did it too, throwing lavish feasts on the eve of execution, as if one last taste of roast boar could dull the blade of justice. Quirky fact for you, the Mongols believed spilling family blood inside a home brought a curse, so executions were often done by strangulation. You think of that when you picture Caleb leaving his mother and sister sprawled in the kitchen. No ritual, no hesitation, just erasure. Back at the station, the Las Vegas police hold Caleb in an interview room chilled a few degrees too low on purpose. It's a psychological trick. Cold makes people more compliant, more desperate for comfort. At first, he's full of denials. I was in Vegas all weekend. I didn't know anything happened. Why would I hurt my family? He doesn't cry this time. He's switched strategies. Now he's the innocent victim, misunderstood, framed, shocked by the accusation. Then they lay out the evidence. First, the gas station footage time-stamped, matching the missing SUV. Then, the credit card transactions purchases made within hours of the murders, using stolen identity. And finally, the kicker, footage from a storage unit outside town. Caleb, mid-afternoon on January 22nd, unloading a gym bag. When they open the unit later, they find clothes with blood residue, a pair of gloves, and an empty gun case. The detective leans back, says nothing, just watches Caleb shift in his seat. You see it in real time, the unraveling. He starts blinking faster, tugs at his sleeves, looks up at the ceiling like the answers are written there. Historians still argue whether confessions under pressure should be considered fully voluntary, especially in high-stakes cases. But this wasn't pressure, this was inevitability. A story that couldn't outrun its own plot. Eventually, Caleb says, "What if I told you it was an accident?" That's how it begins. Not a full confession, just a crack in the dam. From there, it all spills out. He spins a story, something about a fight, self-defense, confusion, blurred vision. None of it sticks. He contradicts himself twice in 5 minutes. Finally, when the detectives just sit in silence and let the noise of his own guilt fill the room, he folds. He admits it, not with remorse, not even with fear, just fatigue. As if holding the truth had been heavier than committing the crime. You think back to the weekend he spent at home, to the way he smiled with his mouth but not his eyes, to the quiet mornings, the careful gestures. You realize now it wasn't reconciliation, it was reconnaissance. He studied routines, entry points, alarm codes, Eleanor's coffee time, Natalie's playlists, Gregory's conference call schedule. It wasn't rage that drove him. It wasn't even revenge. It was calculation, a belief that if he cleaned up well enough, if he smiled in the right places, cried at the right time, deleted just enough data he could rewrite the ending. But life doesn't work like editing a photo. There's no remove red eye for homicide, no filter for betrayal. So they book him. 3 counts of murder, premeditated, 1st degree. The prosecutor's office announces their intention to pursue the death penalty. The news cycles eat it up. Caleb's mugshot spreads like wildfire. It's different from the one they'd used in the early press this time. He's not smiling. Some people say he looks haunted. Others say he looks bored. You say he looks empty. Because behind the booking number and the cold lighting, there's a boy who mistook entitlement for injustice, who thought being cut off meant being wronged, Who saw the people who raised him as obstacles, not roots? And now, sitting in a holding cell with fluorescent lights and a blanket that smells like bleach, Caleb finally has nothing left to spend. No lies, no cards, no champagne, just time. You walk into the courtroom before Caleb does. It's quiet, sterile, more intimidating in its stillness than any outburst could ever be. The benches are polished but creak with the weight of mourning. The walls are off-white, the kind that pretends to be warm but feels like paper. In front, the seal of the state of Oregon stares down at everyone with blank authority, and then Caleb is led in orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, hair a little longer than it should be. No designer shoes, no aviators, just a shuffling echo behind the bailiff's boots. The people in the room stare at him like they're trying to figure out what exactly they're looking at. A murderer, a broken boy, a symptom of something bigger, maybe all of the above. He doesn't look at them, not the jury, not the judge, not even the row of seats where his surviving relatives sit, an aunt, a cousin, an old family friend holding back tears. He stares at the floor, not out of shame, you think, but strategy. If he doesn't meet their eyes, he doesn't have to be human. And if he's not human, maybe the guilt won't stick. The prosecution begins with precision. 3 lives. They say, not just lost taken, by someone with access, knowledge, and motive. They present Caleb's financial records, the missing DVR, the text to his mother, the exact timestamps from the gas station, the cold efficiency of a plan that didn't unravel. It simply concluded, one by one. The pieces are laid out, each one fits a little too cleanly. And as they talk, the room starts to shift. You can feel it. The narrative hardens. Not a lost son, not a misunderstood youth, a killer. Caleb's defense team tries to offer a different story. Trauma, mental illness, addiction, pressure. They paint a picture of a boy drowning in a sea of unmet expectations, a house where failure was punished more than it was understood. They even mention Gregory's emotional distance, Eleanor's rigid standards. It's a sad song, but not persuasive, because at the center of it all is Natalie's unfinished text, and the security footage, and the soda can with Caleb's fingerprints on it left in the sink, right beside his mother's blood. And still, you wonder, historians still argue whether the American justice system can fairly navigate family-based homicides. The emotional weight, the media spectacle, the blurred lines between motive and mental decay. It's a hard tangle to parse cleanly, but in this courtroom, no one's arguing theory. They are counting lives, 3 of them. The most haunting testimony comes from Marlene. She takes the stand in a conservative blouse, hands trembling. Her voice is soft, but her memory is sharp. She describes the smell, the silence, the look in Natalie's eyes, even in death, half a plea, half a question. She pauses once. When describing the frog on the porch, her voice cracks, and for a moment, the entire room holds its breath. I trusted him, she says. I think, so did they. It's not damning, but it doesn't need to be. A quirky historical parallel. In Victorian England, family portraits were often touched up to remove any hint of sadness. Even posthumous portraits of children were made to look serene. There's something eerily similar in how people talk about Caleb. Everyone trying to repaint the memory, soften the brushstrokes, make it make sense. But it doesn't, not really. As the trial enters its 2nd week, the death penalty becomes the central question. Prosecutors push hard. 3 lives, they argue, deserve the harshest sentence available. The crime was cold, deliberate, premeditated. But then the aunt speaks. Eleanor's sister. She doesn't cry when she reads her statement. She just breathes through it, deep and slow. We've lost enough already, she says. I don't want to sit through decades of appeals. I don't want to see his face on the news every 5 years. Let him disappear. Let this end. It's not forgiveness, not even mercy. It's surrender, a plea to stop the bleeding, even if the wounds never close. Gregory's brother agrees. So does Natalie's best friend's father, who had known her since she was 4. You sit there, listening. You think of Eleanor's chamomile tea, Gregory's coffee ring, Natalie's heart sticker. You think about how families carry weight sometimes as love, sometimes as expectation, sometimes as history, and sometimes as silence. In the end, the judge delivers the sentence: 3 consecutive life terms. No possibility of parole, no more bargaining, no more champagne, just a metal bed, a ticking clock, and memories that won't go anywhere. When Caleb is led away, he glances up once, and you see it, that flicker, not regret, not fear, recognition. He knows it's over. You don't see Caleb again, not in person. Anyway, his image lingers in courtroom sketches, grainy mugshots, and the occasional tabloid deep dive. But the man himself disappears into the folds of a system built to forget people like him. 3 life sentences means no interviews, no headlines, no redemption arcs. But the town of Pine Brook Hills, it doesn't forget. It can't, because the Whitmore house still stands. You pass it sometimes. You can't help it. The lawn is kept up now by a property management company. The flowers are different. The porch frog is gone, but the structure remains quiet, white, and watching. Some folks say it should be torn down. Others think it should become a memorial. Most just drive a little faster past it. Marlene. She stopped cleaning houses after that day. She moved 2 towns over, took up knitting, teaches a crochet class at the local library on Tuesdays. People say she's quieter now, less for Mama Poyes still wears her hair in that same tidy bun. Though you think of her more than you expect to. You think about how she stepped into the house that morning expecting chores. Maybe a leftover scone if Eleanor had baked. Instead, she walked straight into a horror scene with linoleum floors. Back then, people blamed Caleb. Now, they blame everything. The pressure of modern parenting, the culture of entitlement, a society that turns kids into consumers before they've grown calluses. You hear all the theories. Some people say Eleanor was too soft. Others say Gregory was too hard. Still others say it was just Caleb, plain and simple. But you know, it's never just one thing. Historians still argue whether patterns of familial violence are passed down through learned behavior or born out of individual pathology. But you've stood in that hallway. You've seen the family photos with the dust rubbed clean, the piano that hadn't been played in years, the framed diploma that hung just slightly crooked. You remember the silence most of all. A quirky fact: in ancient Persia, it was customary to bury murderers at the edge of the city, close enough to remember, far enough to forget. It was believed that proximity bred accountability. But in modern suburbia, we tend to do the opposite. We push it as far away as possible. After the trial, the news trucks eventually pack up. Journalists move on to fresher tragedies. Pine Brook Hills tries to return to normal. The town's annual 4th of July fireworks are subdued that summer. No one says it outright, but you feel it. Less laughter, more sidelong glances. Parents hold their children closer. Porch lights stay on longer. Natalie's high school erects a bench in her honor. It's painted Columbia blue, her dream school's color. Students leave notes beneath it, quotes, doodles, folded poems. There's one that reads simply, "You made me believe smart could be kind." You sit there once, late one evening. The air is damp, and you can hear sprinklers ticking in the distance. Someone left a daisy on the bench. It's plastic, but it still moves in the breeze like it's alive. You think about Eleanor, who once choreographed a benefit dance for the library fundraiser. About Gregory, who used to mow his own lawn. Even after the promotion. About Natalie, who brought you a slice of pie after your surgery, wrapped in foil with a handwritten label. And you think about Caleb, whose name people now whisper like it might infect the air. People try to understand evil by shrinking it, labeling it monster, sociopath, broken. But what you saw, what you lived, it wasn't a monster. It was a boy in designer jeans who smiled in photos and knew where the spare key was hidden. There's no grave for Eleanor, Gregory, or Natalie. They were cremated, their ashes scattered at the coast where they used to vacation. No headstones, no mausoleums, just ocean. But in some ways, the house remains a memorial, even empty, even silent, even sold and scrubbed and restaged with new furniture. You can paint the walls, but you can't repaint memory. You wonder if the new owners know, if they feel it at night, the strange hush in the air, the way footsteps echo slightly too loud, or the way the hall light flickers not broken, just reluctant. You stop driving past the Whitmore house after a while. It's not that you forget, It's just that your brain politely learns to reroute, like a detour sign around grief. You take the long way to the store now, a few extra minutes to avoid the street where ghosts still sit at kitchen tables. But every now and then, you catch a glimpse. Out of the corner of your eye, a new car in the driveway, a potted plant by the porch. Signs that life, somehow, persists. You find that unnerving. The new family has 2 young kids. They painted the shutters navy blue. There's a scooter left on the lawn most days, tipped over like it's in mid-fall. You almost want to knock on their door and whisper, "Do you know what happened here?" But of course, they do. The house sold for a fraction of market value. Disclosures were signed. But people forget on purpose, or they decide the past is just old furniture left behind. Meanwhile, the real reminders live in you. In Marlene, in Natalie's classmates who still pause when someone mentions her name, in the handful of Pinebrook parents who suddenly find themselves peeking at their teenagers a little longer, wondering what they've missed. Caleb doesn't speak to the press. He's issued no statement, no apology. He's in a state penitentiary now, Salem. Medium-high security. His inmate file lists him as quiet, compliant, solitary. Reads like a list of symptoms. You picture him in the library, reading slowly, or lifting weights alone, pretending he's still in control of something. A guard once told a reporter, off the record, that Caleb barely talks, like he knows if he opens his mouth, the whole room will remember. In a way, he's right. You wonder what he dreams about. If he sees the kitchen, the blood, the way Natalie turned mid-step, the phone slipping from her hand, or if he dreams of Vegas lights, room service, and clean towels. Either way, his world is only 6 feet wide now. A bunk, a toilet, a concrete floor with a crack running down the middle. Maybe that's fitting. He cracked everything else, too. Historians still argue whether prison is about punishment or prevention. Some say it's society's way of drawing a thick black line between them and us. But what happens when them came from inside the house? You find yourself returning to Natalie's text sometimes. The one that ended too soon. Can't wait to tell you everything. What was she going to say? He's changed. He's trying. He's here. Or maybe, he's scaring me. You'll never know, and neither will her best friend, who waited by her phone for a reply that never came. That girl went on to college. By the way, double major, environmental science and art history. Started a podcast about small-town resilience. Mentions Natalie sometimes. Calls her the kind of smart that made you smarter by standing near her. Funny how loss echoes louder when it comes from someone kind. Quirky bit of trivia. In 14th century Japan, mourners used to write poems and float them down rivers as a way to say goodbye. You think about doing that, writing something, folding it, releasing it. But the closest river near Pinebrook Hills is barely a creek, and your poetry never rhymed. So instead, you write this in your head. At least, because sometimes the only way to process the story is to tell it again, quietly, like a bedtime story. You're not sure anyone wants to hear, but somehow they stay, they listen, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. The community slowly stitches itself back together. As communities do, it hosts fundraisers, holds vigils, starts conversations about mental health and family communication. A couple of those stick, most fade, but one good thing, Natalie's old school starts a scholarship for students who show academic excellence and uncommon kindness. That phrase catches you. Not just kindness. Uncommon kindness. That's the legacy she gets. And Caleb, he gets silence, which, in the end, is probably louder than any cell block. The seasons change in Pinebrook Hills, but the calendar always circles back to January 22nd. Like it has unfinished business. Some years, it passes quietly. Others, a headline pops up. 5 years since the Whitmore tragedy. They always use that word tragedy like it was weather or fate, something no one could stop. But you know better. It wasn't fate that pulled the trigger. It was a boy raised in privilege, hollowed out by resentment, and driven not by desperation, but entitlement. The kind of entitlement that grows slowly like mold in a ceiling you keep ignoring until it crashes down. That January, the town holds a candlelight vigil. Not in front of the house too close, too raw, but at the high school track where Natalie used to run laps after class. Her teammates speak softly, voices cracking at the edges. Someone plays her favorite song. You watch from the back, your breath making small ghosts in the cold air. Marlene is there too. She doesn't speak, just stands near the edge of the crowd, her scarf pulled tight. Every so often, someone touches her arm gently. She nods, says nothing. People still ask her what she saw. She never tells them everything. She once said, "There are some things you don't share, not because you want to forget, but because you need them to stay still." You get that now. After the vigil, a girl leaves a note near the field. "Natalie, I ran faster because I wanted to catch up to you." You sit with that for a while. Historians still argue whether memory is more reliable when written or spoken, but in Pine Brook Hills, memory is felt. It's in the awkward pauses during neighborhood barbecues, in the flowers someone still places near the old ceramic frog's resting place, even though the frog itself is long gone. Sometimes you visit the grocery store and see someone squinting at a product on the shelves, and just for a second, you think it's Eleanor. You think about how she used to keep a small notepad in her purse, one with categorized grocery lists by aisle. She believed in systems, believed that if you followed the right steps, life would stay clean. You think about Gregory too, how he used to wave at neighbors from his driveway, even when he was late for a meeting. His voice was always a half laugh, like he knew how to deliver charm in digestible portions. Gregory Whitmore. He once introduced himself at a charity auction, recovering control freak and current dad of two. And Natalie. You remember her best, not by how she died, but how she moved. Light. Quick, like she always had somewhere better to be but never made you feel like she was in a rush. She made space for people. Caleb made holes. There's a documentary made a few years later. Local crew, thoughtful tone, interviews with former classmates, old neighbors, even the detective who found the missing DVR cables hidden beneath Caleb's laundry. No reenactments, just voices. The director said, "We didn't want to sensationalize, just acknowledge." It wins a regional award. Natalie's scholarship fund sees a spike in donations. A couple of true crime forums pick it up. Then, like most things, it fades again. The internet is a fast river. Not everything gets to linger. But the house, it lingers. The new owners eventually move out. Last only 13 months. Say it's the commute. Say they wanted a bigger backyard. But people talk. Pine Brook always talks. It sits vacant now, curtains drawn. Mail stopped, a for sale sign that keeps changing agents. People call it cursed. You think it's just tired? Quirky fact. In some early American colonial towns, homes where murders occurred were often repurposed as community spaces, bakeries, town halls, even schools. The idea was to give the space a new story, to overwrite the sorrow, but no one wants to bake cookies where Eleanor bled out beside a dropped spatula. You once had a dream about the house. It wasn't scary, just strange. You were standing in the living room, and the rooms were full of windows open, curtains breathing in and out. You heard Eleanor humming, Natalie laughing upstairs, Gregory on a work call. Caleb wasn't there. When you woke up, the silence in your room felt heavier than usual. You still don't know what the dream meant. Maybe it was grief trying to be gentle. Maybe it was your brain offering you a version of the story that didn't end in blood. Or maybe, just maybe, the house was trying to say goodbye. You begin to understand that the Whitmore story isn't just one story, it's 100. Fragmented memories, half-remembered phone calls, flickers of body language that only made sense in hindsight. Everyone in Pine Brook Hills carries a different version of it. Like broken pieces of a family photograph no one knows how to reassemble. The detective who led the investigation, Officer Lynn Parson, retired a year after the sentencing. You bump into her once at a local coffee shop. She's wearing jeans and a flannel now, hair pulled into a ponytail. She doesn't recognize you at first. You talk for a bit. She tells you Caleb was one of the hardest arrests she's ever made, not because the evidence was lacking, but because he didn't look like a killer. He looked like one of my son's friends, she says, stirring her coffee. That's what scared me the most. Historians still argue whether outward appearance subconsciously biases the public's sense of guilt. Some even say we're hardwired to trust symmetry and good grooming. Caleb had both, until he didn't. She says she still thinks about Gregory's shoes. Sitting by the door, she murmurs, polished, untouched. He was still taking pride in little things, right up to the end. You thank her for her time. She waves goodbye. There's something in her posture relaxed, but not quite. Like a soldier on permanent standby, you pass the storage unit on your way home. The same one where Caleb stashed his gym bag and gloves. It's still in operation. Still has those mustard yellow roll-up doors. There's a dent in the one from Caleb's unit, like someone once kicked it hard. The manager tells people that a Netflix crew scouted this place once. They didn't, but the myth persists. Funny how we try to turn trauma into trivia. Makes it feel safer. The Whitmore murders have become that kind of local shorthand now. You hear it in sentences like, "Don't pull a Caleb," or "She's got that Whitmore silence." It's inappropriate, but also inevitable because people can't carry grief forever. So they reshape it into folklore. Cautionary tales, shortcuts. You drive past Natalie's school again. The scholarship plaque has been moved to the library entrance. You stop and look at it. In memory of Natalie Whitmore. Academic excellence and uncommon kindness. There's a fingerprint smudge on the glass. You don't wipe it. You think about how Natalie kept a gratitude journal. You learned that from her best friend's interview. She wrote 3 things each day that made her happy. Some entries were big. Got into Columbia. Others were tiny. Sun hit my cereal just right. It's that kind of detail that stays with you. Not the crime scene photos. Not the courtroom testimony. Not even Caleb's face. It's sun on cereal. Quirky historical footnote. In some ancient Nordic cultures, grief was expressed through communal baking families. Of the deceased would spend days preparing memory loaves, each shaped by Bont and baked with herbs symbolizing sorrow and protection. You wish you had something like that now. Instead, you carry your version of the Whitmores like a note in your coat pocket. Always there, sometimes forgotten, but never lost. You try not to imagine what would have happened if Caleb hadn't confessed, if the camera had been angled differently, if the receipt had gone unnoticed. But that road leads to nowhere. The truth is, he did it. And the deeper truth is, no one saw it coming and time to stop him. Sometimes, when it's especially quiet in the evenings, you replay the timeline just to see if anything still surprises you, and it does. The calm, the methodical planning, the way he destroyed the security system like he was taking out the trash. No drama, no hesitation, just silence. Like he thought that silence would make it cleaner. It didn't. It only made it worse. And now, years later, that silence is the only part that still lingers. In the room where Eleanor made tea, in the hallway where Natalie took her last steps, in the dining room where Gregory dropped his briefcase for the last time, in the gaps between what was said and what was never spoken, in the spaces we leave behind, you notice something subtle as time continues its slow, indifferent crawl. People begin rewriting the story, not maliciously, just instinctively. The way memory reshuffles itself to feel less sharp. You hear newer residents of Pinebrook Hills talk about the Whitmore thing, like it was a freak event, an unlucky break, like being struck by lightning. But you remember, you were there, and you know it wasn't lightning. It was rot, growing slowly behind a picture-perfect facade. It was love that was conditional, forgiveness that came too late, and silence where help should have lived. Even the prosecutors started their own quiet forgetting. After Caleb's sentencing, the state moved on to other cases, but you remember hearing them talk, especially Assistant District Attorney Megan Yates, who handled the trial. You saw her speak at a legal panel once, and when someone brought up the Whitmore case, her eyes flickered before she spoke. She said, "It wasn't the violence that stayed with me, it was the calm. He did it like someone flipping a switch. There was no dramatics, no outburst in court, no parting words. Caleb didn't even flinch when the sentence was read. That's what frightened her." Historians still argue whether cold-bloodedness is learned, inherited, or chosen. But when it's that clean, that empty, it's like staring into a dark room with no walls. And everyone hopes there's a reason, something that makes sense of it. But sometimes, there just isn't. After sentencing, Caleb was moved to a more isolated wing of the prison. Word got around that he'd refused all visits from remaining family. His aunt sent one letter, just one. It came back unopened, marked return to sender. He hasn't spoken publicly since. No interviews, no essays, no tearful apologies scrawled in pencil. The prison log simply marks his name with a timestamp every evening. Still alive, still silent. Marlene says she sometimes dreams about him, not in nightmares, oddly, but in weird, calm scenes. Caleb sitting in the Whitmore living room, watching the news, eating toast, turning to her and saying, "I didn't think it would be so quiet after." She wakes up every time before she can answer. She tells you this while sipping black tea, hands wrapped around the mug like it might float away otherwise. You ask if she regrets working for the Whitmores. She thinks for a moment, then says, "No, they were good people in a house full of thin ice." She pauses, then adds, "But I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I'd seen the cracks." You don't blame her. No one does, but she does, deep down, in a place where guilt lives on even when logic moves out. Quirky historical echo. In 16th century Venice, when someone committed a heinous crime, their house was often painted black and left to decay. Locals would avoid it for generations. Children dared each other to run past. It wasn't about justice, it was about memory, about leaving a scar on the city. The Whitmore house isn't painted black. It's beige now. Someone tried to erase the scar. You remember when the real estate agent came through after the trial. He brought scented candles, vanilla, mostly, said it helped prospective buyers focus on the future. You thought that was funny? Because what future lives in a house where the past hasn't finished speaking? Gregory's office is now a reading nook. Eleanor's kitchen was remodeled. Natalie's room is a nursery now, painted a soft yellow, with a name banner over the crib. You saw the listing photos once. You studied them too long. There was no mention of Caleb, or the date January 22nd, or the DVR pulled from the wall. Just phrases like sun-drenched breakfast area and move-in ready. And still, when you close your eyes, you see Eleanor's spatula, Natalie's phone, Gregory's briefcase. It doesn't matter how many layers of paint cover the walls, the memory bleeds through, but not everything fades. Natalie's scholarship fund has grown. Last year, it sent 2 students to college. One is studying to be a teacher, the other, a forensic psychologist. She says she wants to work with families before it's too late, and there's something comforting in that. Something that makes you believe the story didn't end entirely in that kitchen, that some threads still stretch outward. That maybe the most broken stories can be reframed, not erased, but repurposed. Because what happened at the Whitmore house wasn't just loss, it was a warning. And you're still listening. You almost forget about him for a while, not because the story loses weight, but because life starts crowding the space where his name used to live. That's what time does. It stacks new things on top of old scars until you only remember when the weather shifts and the ache comes back. And then, one day, he returns. Not in person, of course. Caleb's still locked away in Salem, but in the form of a letter. It arrives at the district attorney's office in an unmarked envelope with no return address, postmarked from within the prison system. Inside, a 3-page handwritten letter, neatly penned, grammatically precise, addressed not to his surviving family, not to his attorney, not to the court, but to the people of Pinebrook Hills. The tone is peculiar. He doesn't ask for forgiveness, doesn't even offer a reason, just recounts memories of the house, the smell of his mother's coffee, the sound of Natalie's laugh through the hallway vent. "I wanted," he writes, "to feel loved again, but I didn't know how to ask for it without setting everything on fire." The letter ends with a single sentence. "If silence was my crime, then this is my sentence." Historians still argue whether public confessions serve the confessor or the audience. Are they a step toward redemption or a final attempt to control the narrative? Either way, the letter doesn't reach the public immediately. It's filed, scanned, passed around like a hot coal. Eventually, someone leaks it. It hits local news, then national. Crime podcasts pick it up. So do true crime TikTokers, who perform dramatic readings with slow piano music in the background. The reactions are mixed. Some say it's a cry for help. Others say it's manipulation, weaponized guilt dressed as poetry. You read it twice. Then you fold it up and put it away. Because you know something those commenters don't. The Whitmore house didn't die with the family it keeps living. In everyone who cleaned the blood, everyone who heard the sirens, everyone who called and got no answer. You drive past the high school again. The blue bench is still there. Someone's carved a small heart into the metal armrest. Probably a student. Probably recently. That means someone's still sitting there, still remembering. You stop by Marlene's again. She's older now, walks slower. She tells you she's thinking of moving, maybe to be near her sister in Idaho, somewhere quieter, with no Whitmores in the background. She pauses, then asks, "Do you think the house still remembers me?" You want to say no. You want to say, "It's just drywall and beams." Marlene, houses don't remember people, but that's a lie. Some places do remember. Quirky bit of trivia for you. In parts of West Africa, there's a belief that objects can hold the emotions of those who touch them. Not just memories, but full feelings. Anger, fear, sorrow trapped in wood, in stone, in air, you can cleanse them. They say, but only if you name what happened out loud. Maybe that's what this script is, a naming. Not just of the dead, but of the silence that killed them. Natalie's friends start an annual event now, a kind of memorial run. They don't make a big deal out of it, just a handful of people jogging together, wearing blue pins. They call it the quiet step. You attend 1 year. You don't run, but you walk along the trail. Every footstep feels like a pulse, like a heartbeat trying to stay steady in a world that keeps glitching. You catch fragments of conversations. She was always helping someone. I still think about that essay she wrote. I never met her, but I wish I had. And just like that, she's alive again. Not in flesh, but in sound, in story, in movement. Not erased, not a cautionary tale, just Natalie. And Caleb. He remains where he put himself. No longer the golden boy, no longer the rebel, just a name filed in a drawer, a photo in an archive, a number in a system. Every year, he requests fewer privileges, attends fewer activities, withdraws a little more. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's strategy, maybe finally it's understanding. But the world has moved on. And the rest of the Whitmores, they are where love still remembers them. Not just in memory, but in motion. You return one last time to Sycamore Lane, not because you expect to see anything new, but because something inside you asks to. It's been years. The grass is taller now. The shutters have faded again. There's a new for sale sign planted in the yard, sleek, metallic, hopeful in a way that feels almost insulting. You park across the street, watch it from a distance. It's not haunted in the way horror movies make you think. There's no flickering lights, no strange voices, just a stillness too heavy for a house of its size. The kind of silence that feels exhausted. No one stays long here anymore. 3 sets of owners in less than a decade, each family leaving for vague reasons, job relocation, change of scenery. Didn't feel like home, but you know it wasn't the location. It wasn't the square footage. It was the feeling, that quiet sensation that the walls are listening. That something happened here that never finished echoing. You sit there a long time, long enough for the clouds to shift, for the street lights to flicker on, for a cat to cross the driveway and vanish into the hedges. And then, a thought comes uninvited but precise. What would it have taken to stop him? You try to build the answer like a bridge. Earlier intervention, more communication, a stricter parent, a softer one, fewer credit cards, more therapy, less shame. Historians still argue whether modern parenting has created a generation more sensitive to rejection, more prone to collapse under ordinary pressure. But you don't think Caleb collapsed? You think he calculated, he weighed his family against his frustration, and they lost. That's what you've never quite been able to shake. Not the violence, but the math of it. That somewhere in that cold, burned mind of his, murder added up to a viable solution, that he could look his mother in the eye and still raise the gun. The town of Pine Brook Hills carries on. There's a new mayor now. The grocery store was renovated. They even opened a second coffee shop near the park, the kind with latte art and local honey. People go there to work on laptops, to gossip quietly, to pretend nothing ever cracked open in this town. But look closely, and you still see the seams. Neighbors who once chatted on porches now wave from a distance. Families who never locked their doors now double-check before bed. And on January 22nd each year, someone always leaves 3 white candles at the edge of Sycamore Lane. No names, no notes, just flame. You stop by the high school again. The library has been redone, sleek new chairs, digital catalogs, cheerful lighting, but the plaque remains. Uncommon kindness. It glints in the overhead light like it's watching. Quirky, historical footnote. In ancient Tibet, grieving families were encouraged to paint symbols on stones and leave them along public paths, so travelers could walk through sorrow and leave with a piece of it. You think about how that might work now. Stones at the end of driveways, outside courtrooms, near the nursery in a remodeled house, and you wonder how many you'd carry with you before the weight slowed you down. You see Marlene sometimes on social media. Her niece taught her how to use Instagram. She posts pictures of tea, flowers, birds in her garden. The captions are simple. Morning light, daisies again. This mug has been with me 20 years. No mention of the Whitmores, but you know they're there. Somewhere between the hashtags, you once saw her reply to a comment that asked how she stays so calm. She wrote, "You keep walking, even when the silence follows," and that's what Pinebrook Hills does. It walks. The community garden is still open. The scholarship fund is still growing. The track team runs every Thursday afternoon, blue pins on their shirts, untied laces flapping like forgotten ribbons. You leave the house on Sycamore Lane for the last time as the sky fades to a soft indigo. No one else is around. No noise, just the creak of the sign in the yard as the wind shifts. The air smells of pine, dust, and something else you can't name. You take one last look at the porch where the ceramic frog used to sit, and then, quietly, you let it go. You return home, not to a house marked by headlines, but to your own quiet space. You lock the door, not because you're scared, but because you now understand that safety isn't just a structure, it's a choice, a rhythm, a relationship with those who live inside. You brew tea without looking over your shoulder. You turn on the lamp that flickers slightly but always works on the second try. You sit down and let the story settle, not like a rock in your stomach, but like sediment in a jar of water. It takes time. It clears slowly. You've told this story in pieces, to friends, to strangers, maybe even to yourself in the mirror, but this time, you told it fully. No edits, no skips. You laid out the steps, the breakfasts, the broken silences, the gun in the drawer, the boy who forgot what love felt like. And now, it's time to set it down. Caleb Whitmore serves his 3 life sentences in silence. No visitors, no parole hearings, no second act. He never appealed, not once. The aunt who once begged the judge to spare his life passed away last winter. Her obituary made no mention of a nephew, just a sister, 2 nieces, and an abiding love of crossword puzzles. Gregory's company was sold. The new CEO rebranded the firm, scrubbed the website, changed the slogan. You can still find clips of him online, shaking hands at events, as if he never existed inside a home with blood on the kitchen floor. Natalie's scholarship continues. This year, the recipient is a foster kid who writes poetry about glass ceilings and garden walls. She signs her thank you letter for Natalie, for what could have been. You read that and pause, because that's the difference. Natalie was a future, Caleb was a fracture, and the house, still empty again. The last owners moved out mid-lease, said it was bad energy. The realtor stopped trying to pretend. The listing now reads, historic home, as is, make offer. You don't think anyone will? There's a kind of peace in that, not justice. Exactly. But stillness, a ceasefire between past and present. Historians still argue whether true closure is possible after violent loss, whether some wounds should remain open as reminders. Maybe it's not about healing. Maybe it's about witnessing, about staying with this discomfort long enough to let it turn into meaning. So you do. You remember Natalie's voice? The soft way she once said a thank you at a school assembly. You remember Eleanor's chamomile tea. You remember Gregory's laugh echoing from the garage on Sunday afternoons. And yes, you remember Caleb, not as a boy, not as a monster, just as the choice he made. And that's where it ends. Not with a bang, not with a twist, but with a breath, because sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones with ghosts. They're the ones where everything looks normal until it doesn't. And now, as we slip gently away from this story, I want you to take one last deep breath in and out. Let the heaviness of these moments settle into a soft whisper at the edge of your thoughts. You're no longer in that house. You're no longer tracing bloodstains or reading silent screens. You're here, in the quiet safety of your own space, where the past cannot touch you unless you let it. Let the images blur now, the porch light dimming, The old ceramic frog turned to dust. Let them drift into the same corner of your mind that holds old letters and forgotten dreams. There is no rush, just a slow, gentle return. If you find yourself holding tension anywhere in your body, your jaw, your shoulders, your hands, let it go. Remind yourself that you are safe. That stories can be heavy, yes, but they are still just stories, echoes that fade, shadows that lift in the morning. You've walked through something dark tonight, and you made it through. And now, it's time to sleep. Let your breath grow longer, slower. Let the quiet settle over you like a favorite blanket. There is no need to remember everything, only that you were here, that you bore witness, that you now carry the stillness forward. Good night, friend.